you can get away with things on the bike. You could get an hour, hour and a half behind on the bike in nutrition wise, and you might feel, okay, but you keep moving and you got the breeze in your face and you're somewhat comfortable, and it's not taking your rate of perceived exertion isn't as high on the bike as it is on the run. Your heart rate's lower on the bike. Well, then you hop off and it is ultimate exposure. You are running the streets of Ironman, Wisconsin naked with all of your mistakes.
Good Monday morning.
Man, happy Monday, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, you're doing pretty good?
Yeah, I was doing great until you declined my call there.
What? Listen, man, don't take it so personally. You're always getting things set up in the satellite C26 office here in Chattanooga, and getting some things on the wall and getting things nice and prepared for your first arrival tomorrow.
Oh, you're down there, huh?
Yeah, down there today and getting things set up, and got to roll out the red carpet for your visit.
I like to hear that. I like it.
So, a couple things before we get rocking today, because I got quite a few topics.
Okay.
First off, we haven't heard about your training in a while. You're training for Ironman, Wisconsin.
Right.
And for the rest of you, this is the Crushing Iron Podcast. What are we, episode 283?
We are. 283.
In 283, we've been coming to you twice a week for the past 2.5 years. We appreciate you joining us. We cover all things triathlon, life, and how to integrate both in hopefully a happy and positive way that allows you to keep the things you want to keep in your life positive and get rid of the rest, and hopefully transfer that into your triathlon as a hobby and keeping things happy and healthy as much as you can. And we do that, like you said, twice a week. And we'll keep doing it. And we appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate all your feedback, emails. If it is your first time listening, you can always check out all the things that we do. CrushingIron.com. It is our one-stop shop. But Mike is doing Ironman Wisconsin in September and has been pretty much in a zone, but we haven't checked in on you in a while. So how's training going?
Oh, man. Catching me off guard.
Hey, one of us has to be training for something. So how's your training going?
Well, I was just, I think it's going pretty well, man. I was going to sort of capture like a month just to show like some of the things I've been doing, but like more importantly, some of the workouts that I've kind of modified, like as in come up a little bit short or missed, and show that just because, you don't nail every workout, that doesn't mean that your training's not going great. I actually feel like I'm in possibly maybe a little bit more ahead of the game than I've ever been.
Oh, why is that?
Well, it goes back to the fact that I've been consistently running for a long time, and I've been consistent with it and fortunate enough to not, get injured or any of that kind of stuff. So I've been running pretty well. I've been running a lot of hills. And I've been riding a lot of hills. I went out to the trace Saturday, and instead of going for mileage at all, I just went after hills again. And while it's one of those things that I was kind of thinking about today it's very difficult sometimes to kind of remember that today isn't the race. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of hard to look at my watch and see average speed and things like that, but know that I've got in some really good work. And then I had a long run yesterday, and I just feel like that ride and doing a lot of those hills and that tough climbing paid off on my run, even though it was a long run. I don't know that's like a real micro way to look at things, but
oh man, you could definitely put a spin on that, and you could do it MIKE. Micro. Yeah, from Mike Terrell, little micro. But isn't that isn't that one of the most difficult things to in terms of and we talk about this a lot, like when it comes to seeing the forest through the trees, and when you get this close to a race and you're building up so much fatigue, and you see these glimpses of improvement and increased fitness and better durability, and you're bouncing back quicker and you're recovering faster. and then you kind of watch the ebb and flow of your fatigue, which also, and again, I without question think this is the most difficult time of year to gauge fitness. I don't even
Really?
think it's I think it's an over I think it's like not even questionable. I mean, I think when you combine the kind of increased fatigue, the increased training, the increased volume, all those things, when you add those together, and then you add in so much heat and what that's doing to people, you can become fitter. You can see your run pace get lower. You can see your bike power get higher. You can see your swim fitness increase. But as you're going from like 80s, 90s, 100s with a heat index that's like, in the, over 100, you're seeing your pace sometimes drift to where it's like you're suffering, and it's taking longer for you to recover. And so I think right now it is so hard for athletes doing races in August, September, October, even November, to know that you're putting the training volume in, to know that you're being consistent, to know that you're supposed to be quote unquote hitting workouts. But as you watch the temperatures climb and you see what heat does to you, it's just hard. It's hard to wrap your brain around. Am I really getting faster? Because
Yeah.
my zone 2 pace today felt like I feel like I was drudging through hell, and it was like a 10:30 pace, and I'm used to running 9. So am I getting slower? And your mind starts to play all those tricks on you, and it's like, oh, you are getting maybe you peaked too soon, and it is. It's just a really, really difficult time. Like I have an athlete that raced this last weekend, and she kind of goes through these ebbs and flows. And she's only running. She did Chattanooga 70.3, had a great race. So right now her focus has shifted from marathon training the last 2 or 3 years, when she went to Boston twice, and now I kind of convinced her to back off the marathons and let's just focus on halves. And let's get some speed work in. Let's stop recovering, kind of going through the same somewhat typical cycles. And this last week, with the heat, she was in Florida. She traveled back to Kentucky, and she was literally saying like, I think I'm getting slower. Because when you can see yourself, and it, you're training hard, and you're being consistent. But when you're traveling, B, like places like Florida or anywhere in the South right now, it's almost unbearable to be outside and to run, and so you can't expect to do anything great, and to kind of see these even like flashes or flash in the pan of increased fitness. And she was like literally saying like, I think I'm getting slower. Like I really just feel like I'm getting slower. And while as a coach, you hear that sometimes when athletes go through, like especially right now in the summer. And I was like, listen, you're not getting slower. And then 48 hours later, she wins the overall in a 5K in PRs. And but that small of a blip is what you have to hold on to for like the next 2 or 3 months, when you are training in such sometimes just like unbearable conditions, where you kind of sometimes have to make a choice and say, listen, if I'm running outside today and it's after 9 a.m. and it's before 7 p.m., speed work or intervals, I'm going to have to basically throw those out the window, because I'm not going to be able to make them work. And that's just the time of year that we're in, and it makes it so difficult to gauge fitness and to gauge form and how you are preparing for your big race.
Yeah, man, it is a weird one, and it's almost like you have to take your mind to a different level. Even with I think it was a 1:45 yesterday run, and it was super hot. I did get up a little bit earlier than normal and run a little earlier than I normally would, but and so what I did was like, when I'm going slower like that, I just try to really think about my form and not worry about speed, and just kind of go slow and in this strong place. And I've been throwing hill repeats into the middle, even in my like easy zone 2 runs, but I go up the hill super slow. But and even maybe more importantly, when I go down this thing, it's pretty steep. I'm really focused on being balanced and under control, and I'm not breathing heavy, and even when I'm climbing, because I'm just going so slow. But I just like that. I know that it's like this. You got to just trust in the universe on stuff like that sometimes, and realize that what you're doing is paying off, even though it just doesn't seem like it, man. And it's such a weird place to put your head.
Well, it's such a shift in expectation,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why it's such a struggle for so many people that are, especially in, this is like a really common year, a common time of year where athletes like reach out like 2, 3, 4 months out from a race, and they're like, all right, I haven't had coaching before, but right now I feel totally lost. I'm totally tired. I think I'm getting slower. I just need some guidance. And it's the way, or it's that way because, like we said, like this time of year with the heat and with the fatigue, you are getting fitter, but you are 100% totally blind to it, because now it would be so much easier. Like, let's say if you were training, Monday through Friday in 80, 90, 100 degree temps. And then over the weekend on your main rides, you got to travel, somewhere north where the temps are like 50 and 60. You would see instant results in how much, and we all know this. We all know that, like, when you, like, summer running and summer training usually leads yourself to like massive winter PRs. Because if you're training consistently in the summer in that sweltering heat and it's like 90 and 100, your body gets adapted to it. But it's still like I think it's been a while, but we posted either a graph or something back when Louisville used to be in August, that we posted like the effects that the dew point and the humidity have on your run pace.
It's
and
incredible.
How much it's insane. And I think they worked the chart up basically, I think from like high 40s to low 50s is supposed to be basically optimal, optimal training conditions. And then as you work your way up, both in temperature, humidity, and dew point, obviously it shows like your pace getting so much slower. And even to like where the dew point I think is above 65 or 70, it basically suggests either run inside or stay away from intervals, because it's not necessarily going to be counterproductive, but you're going to get little to no fitness benefit from it, and it's going to leave you absolutely shelled for like 2 days. And then also, obviously, it works its way down. The colder it gets, your body takes energy and has to burn calories and has to take some of the energy away to help keep you warm. So it works its way down. But that's the effect that these temperatures have on you. And so when you've been training, throughout the year, March, April, May, June, and you're seeing your pace get faster and faster and faster, and then all of a sudden, now we're in the time of summer where it's just relentless onslaught of humidity and high dew points and heat. You see your pace creep up. If you're running, you're like 9 minute, 9.5, 10 minute, just to basically survive. And then you're like, wait a minute, am I getting faster? And so it does. It's hard to compute and look at things digitally, which so many of us are obsessed with, when you're always looking at your watch, you're always looking at your power, and you're used to like, going outside, like you're hitting the trace and you're used to pushing like, 230 watts up a hill and your heart rate's like 130, 135. Well, in the dead heat of summer, it's going to be like 150, 155. And not only is your heart rate going to be higher for the same watts, but that feeling of perceived exertion is going to be infinitely higher. And that takes more out of you. And so you just have to be really, really careful and strategic and ask yourself, am I just better off running today and being able to wake up tomorrow and do it again than I am really trying to go after these sprints or a hard workout and then not finishing it, walking home? Not only am I going to dig myself a huge hole, but now I'm more than likely not going to be able to recover from my session tomorrow. And so right now it may seem like you're treading water, but if you're doing a race like you're doing Wisconsin, let's say you're doing all these rides in 90 degree heat, you're going to go to Wisconsin, even if it's 80, you're going to feel like it's a cool spring day.
Yeah.
And you're going to see, that's when you're going to see your fitness just, you're going to be tapered, your body's going to be fresh, you're going to be in the best shape of your life, and then the temps are going to drop, so you're able to race at a much better level. Your fitness is really going to shine. But that's 75 days out, something like that. And so you just have to, that's why it's so tough, is because you now have to just believe internally, without any external validation or metric for so many athletes, that you are in fact getting fitter and you do in fact need to keep going.
And there's another thing that I was noticing over the last few days with the heat, and just general soreness, and I think it has a lot to do. It's very difficult to stay hydrated at this time, and you always talk about make sure you're hydrating the night before, during, after, like big time.
Yeah,
and
24/7 right now.
Yeah,
what you got to do.
It's just a weird thing though, because I was noticing that, like at the top of your leg, right where your hip, I guess it would be a hip flexor, but it's not on the side. It's like in front there, right? It's almost in the groin area or whatever. I was having like every time I get up from my desk, I'd be limping. I'd be like, man, that is a tremendous pain right there. And it sort of goes back to that, after you get out of a car and you're limping, and But I went out and rode the trace for like 4 hours, and it felt amazing, But there were sort of these stabbing pains going through my legs at the time. I felt strong, but. And I somehow deduced that, I didn't really hydrate that well. And as I got done, I drank a bunch of water, and the pains went. They're like these little, almost phantom-y pains. Mm-hmm. And that's what, I think that's something that's a sleeper, that if you don't have enough, like literally hydration in your tendons and muscles and things like that, that they get like these little pains in them. And I think those can be deceptive as well. It's hard to go out and really crank for 4 hours, and especially if you're not hydrated going in. And you can get away with it, but, that's flirting with disaster.
Your body's a machine. Mm-hmm. And while it can get away with you not changing its oil and you not having the tank full and you not washing it, you not taking care of it in the spring and perfect months when you're barely driving, it can get away with it. And you might not see any wear and tear. Well, you neglect it in the summer. You don't have enough coolant in there. You're not taking care of it. You haven't got your oil changed in a while. There's not a lot of gas. I'm sitting in the heat for all day. You're screwed. And this time of year, not only I think what happens and this is why it's kind of like the perfect storm of kind of fear with athletes, is that not only is the heat increasing and you're not able to directly see your fitness, based on like we always talk about athletes that are obsessed with paces on the watch, to allow them to, or that's what tells them they're doing good, they're in shape, and they're where they need to be or where they usually want to be. Well, now that's been taken away, and then also what happens is now you're shining the light on some of your inadequacies and failure of preparation in areas like day-to-day nutrition. How are you fueling, and how are you paying attention? You can no longer take for granted that 2-hour easy ride that you used to be able to take advantage or kind of take for granted 2 months ago. Now, you could probably go out 2 months ago, early May, late April, and say, I can probably get away with just like an easy 2 hours with just water and probably be fine, and probably not much breakfast because you got cooling temps, the wind, the nice breeze. But now you head out and you haven't hydrated, you don't have enough fuel on you. Your 2-hour ride or your 3-hour ride's now going to become a death march. And not only is it going to ruin your day, it's more than likely going to ruin the next 2 days. And we talked about this basically this the same time last year. And I said, you're not only fueling for your workout right now, you're fueling for your next one. And so if you're not this time of year, when you're increasing your intensity for some athletes, when you're increasing the volume, when you're trying to be more consistent, when your race day is getting closer and it's getting hotter outside and the elements are more difficult, if you're not basically paying attention 24 hours a day, you're going to suffer. Okay? You're really, really, really going to suffer. And I see it all the time. I see it almost every day in Training Peaks. I didn't take this run or this ride serious enough. I didn't hydrate like I should. I didn't take as much with me. I just feel like I grabbed. You have to prepare, but that's also such a great way to kind of get yourself mentally and emotionally in kind of that mental emotional prep. It's a great time of year to start dialing things in on the amount and attention to detail you're going to have for your big day. Like if you're training right now and you have a 70.3 or an Olympic or a full Ironman, whatever it is, whatever your big race of the year is, because now we're entering that part of the season where, July, August, September, October, and even some athletes in November, they still haven't had their quote unquote A race. You've got Wisconsin. We have a lot of athletes at Wisconsin. You got Muncie coming up this week. You got Traverse City. You got Louisville. You got Chattanooga. You get so many other races. So now is the perfect time to just let your fitness be what it is. and do things the way that you need to do them, and then start acclimating. Because so many athletes, again, and one of the main reasons why I'm such an advocate for training not hard year round but being consistent is that imagine you're an athlete who in May was trying to quote unquote get back in shape and find their fitness after taking November, December, January, February, and March, and just be like, I'll wait till race season. Well, guess what? Now race season's here, and it's 95 and 100 degrees every day. You know how much harder it's going to be for that athlete to gain a huge amount of fitness in a short period of time based on the temperatures that we have, because it's just not going to be there. Their body's not going to be there. Their recovery is not going to be there. And the temps aren't going to allow you to be able to bounce back like you might be able to in like February, March, April, whatever. And so now is even the better time to start. I tell a lot of athletes, like, journal and take notes. When you head out for a ride, it's like a 4-hour ride, 5-hour ride, whatever, or a long run. All right, today breakfast was this. Breakfast was oatmeal, a protein shake, and whatever, and 2 bottles of EFS. At X amount of time before, and then my ride was X, Y, and Z. Okay, and then when they get done, my recovery was this. Okay, while that might not seem important to you at that moment, the next day, if you feel pretty good, guess what you need to know? I need to know exactly what I did the day before. Why it worked, why it felt good. Now, how can I take that knowledge and apply it to my future training sessions? So like imagine like a world-class chef just going into the kitchen and nothing's labeled, and they just kind of grab stuff and like, pinch here sounds good, and a splash here sounds fine, and this probably looks good, and let's say I don't need a measuring cup. I'll just kind of use the hose and spray water. And then they create this like amazing dish, and they have no notes. The chances of them being able to go back and recreate what they just created consistently over and over again are like zero, because they took no time to jot down the specifics, to make notes, and to see what really worked. No, every single time they do it, all right, 2 cups of this, 1 cup of this, a teaspoon of this, a pinch of salt, at this temperature for this long, that it rests for this, cover it with this, bam. Now I can replicate it every time. But most athletes are like, yeah, I'll just take like a pinch of EFS and maybe 2 gels. 2 gels sounds fine today. And you know what? I can probably get away with just a banana for my pre-ride workout or for my pre-ride snack. What did I have the night before? Oh, that's right. I didn't really have a big dinner the night before. I had a couple of lettuce leaves and a raisin. Oh, and I balked today. Well, now I know why, because I didn't consume enough. I didn't fuel properly. So while you might have to shift your focus from the things that you love the most, which are what your Garmin says and what your Training Peak says and what all your data says, let your fitness just kind of evolve to adapt to the temperatures and to the environment, and just kind of let that lie. And now turn all that time you spend on staring at your Training Peaks, staring at your Garmin and all this, now turn your attention towards the thing that's going to allow yourself to perform on race day. Because more athletes ruin their race by making terrible nutrition choices or never having a nutrition plan. So all those hours, those 10, 12, 14, 16, some athletes 18, 20 hours a week you spend training. How much of that time do you spend making sure your nutrition is dialed in? Very few. And then more of them even wait till the last minute. So start to take notes, start to pay attention. I think we had one athlete in our active athlete closed group say he has like an hydration or like a water like intake tracker on his phone that like tells him when to drink and how much, and it like helps him keep track of it day to day. But like those things might sound small, and like I don't really need to do that. I can just like do what I need to, and I'll remember. Well, if you have an office job or you're a busy professional life, you could go 4, 5, 6, 7 hours without even having a sip of water. Mm-hmm. And then you got to rush home from work, and you have no time to do anything, and you can't prepare yourself. So it's a huge thing we need to focus on. And I think that a lot of athletes right now it's not the fun thing to focus on, but it has to be focused on if you want to perform your best on race day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that, and I was talking about before how I've thought that I have been under fueling on the bike, for example, and I've kind of loaded up a little bit more, and I've kind of been a little more aggressive in putting down calories ahead of the game because I was thinking about this. It's almost like, you know how you get when you get sick, you start feeling like you're getting sick, and then all of a sudden you just turn everything upside down in your life, and you start taking vitamins and drinking all this water and getting orange juice and doing everything that your body needs just to get healthy or feel better as fast as possible. And then as soon as you start feeling better, you stop doing all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I've been looking at just training in general and fueling, is that I'm always trying to I guess it's a sort of a preventative approach, but getting ahead of it. Like, I don't go out and when I'm starting to feel like I'm going to fall over, start taking a goo or something like that. I'm taking it ahead of the game. I'm trying to like push that envelope a little bit in front of everything. And it seems to be really working for me. As far as, mixing my bottles a little bit, I don't understand that whole concentrate. Some people say that you don't want to concentrate it too much or whatever, and you got to be careful with. I'm just a by feel person, but I've just been putting a little bit. I would always put like a scoop and a half or whatever in my bottle. I'm just putting a little bit more in there, and then when I refill with some water, it's like halfway full. So I'm taking less water too, and straight water than I used to. And maybe you can talk about this because I think water is huge, and you got to always be drinking it. But like, I think sometimes when you're out there sweating, that it may have a counter effect on me a little bit. And one of those things is like a lot of peeing on the bike or whatever. But I wonder if it's like, it's not replacing the mix or the balance that you're losing through the sweating and all the energy exertion. But I definitely know that I need straight water a lot, but I thought I was maybe taking a little bit too much.
So we've had the majority, well, not majority, but a lot of our athletes, and we talked about this at this last year's May camp, I think it was, and I kind of went through like a nutritional race fueling, presentation, and we have a good partnership with the Core Diet, and they do really, really awesome race fueling plans. And when I had them do my race fueling plan, they do it for like sprint, Olympic, 70.3 Ironman, marathon. They do it for everything. But once I did it, you have to do specific tests with them. It's not like, it's not like your age and your weight and your preferences. It's like you do a test, you do a lot of things to get the numbers to where you want it to be. And one of the first things when I had my phone call with one of their sports nutritionists and dietitians she was like, do not waste stomach real estate on just water. Because she was like, every ounce you put in your mouth needs to have some sort of caloric benefit. And I had never really thought of it that way. Like you have athletes that get, what they would call like kind of waterlogged on a race. Like they take in too much water at once, and now they're like, I can't even stomach to take in calories because I'm so full or I'm bloated. And what she was saying was like, every time you take a drink, obviously you're taking in water, but you need to have calories and fueling and carbs and sugar, sometimes caffeine. All these things you need to be taking in, because let's say you're a person who just has a little bit of nutrition or fueling, like once an hour, even twice an hour. And intermittently, if it's a really, really hot day and you've taken in a ton of just water, well, now the next time you want to take that in, you're like, oh, I don't really feel like taking it in. Like you're going to become like almost like adverse to like wanting to continue to fuel when your body is just kind of at its max with water instead of the calories you need to replenish and continue to keep going. And so I think that's one of the things that athletes really kind of neglect is like, oh, I'll just have a little bit of water here and then calories here. But why waste that like I said, that stomach real estate on just plain water and not calories and sugar and carbs that are going to help fuel you and energize you for the remainder of the day. And so I think that's something that a lot of athletes could definitely pay more attention to. But then also just knowing yourself and knowing what your plan is. We've talked about this on a couple other podcasts before, is that like a lot of athletes say, I just didn't have it on the run today. My run's not where I want it to be. Yet their training says your run is exactly where it needs to be. It's exactly where it needs to be. You've improved on your fitness. Your running is pace is down. Everything is good. You're more durable. And then come race day, you fall apart on the run course, and you consistently blame it on the run, because that's the obvious thing to do, right? It's blame it on the run. But really, the only thing you need to, or the first thing you need to do is you need to take that discipline away, and then go back and look. All right, did I overswim? How was my nutrition? Pre-swim and in T1, did I pace the bike appropriately? And then how did I fuel on the bike? Because I guarantee you, if for some reason like next year you're like, oh, you know what, we need to reverse things, and it's going to be swim, run, bike. The news story would be, I totally bonked on the bike. I just didn't have it today. My bike physics just weren't, because it's the last thing, and it's the one where you're the most depleted, you're the most tired, and every mistake that you've made shows. You can get away with things on the bike. You could get an hour and a half behind on the bike in nutrition-wise, and you might feel, okay, but you keep moving, and you got the breeze in your face, and you're somewhat comfortable, and it's not taking your rate of perceived exertion isn't as high on the bike as it is on the run. Your heart rate's lower on the bike. Well, then you hop off, and it is ultimate exposure. You are running the streets of Ironman, Wisconsin naked with all of your mistakes, and then you're not going to be running anymore. You're going to be walking. And that's why so many people blame their run. It's because it is the last thing. And it is where everything rears its ugly head from the things you've neglected and the poor decisions you made and the mistakes that you had every single day. So it's not, or every single part of the race. So it's not always about the run. It could also sometimes be your fueling was absolutely terrible on the bike. And so your bike was living off the nutrition and the fueling from the day before and the morning of. But then once it ran through that, it ran through what you gave it, the limited amount you did give it on the bike, or just the not enough. Well, then you get to the run. And what also happens on the run? You can't take in nearly as many calories on the run as you can the bike, right? Like on the bike, you can sit up and drink 2 or 3 bottles an hour. I can chew on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I can take some goose down. I can take some Cliff Shot box. Man, an hour running for me, I'm lucky to take in 125, 130 calories, because you got all that sloshing around your stomach. Your heart rate's higher, energy expenditure's more. Your body's demanding so much more. You just can't do it. So that it's just I just think athletes tend to totally neglect that and just make the easiest assumption that my run's just not there. Look a little bit deeper and look at the details and work your way backwards instead of blaming it on the end. Work your way backwards. Figure out how you got there. It's like I drove to work today and I got lost, and I'm sitting in the parking lot. All I know is I got lost, so it has to be the fact that I took a wrong turn in this parking lot. No, it's not. It's because you probably made 4 or 5 wrong turns 20 minutes before that. And so you got to work your way backwards to figure out exactly how you ended up there, and do all the do all the non-fun things that athletes don't like to do, that you can't show anybody, that you can't talk about, that you can't, put on Instagram. That is figuring out your calorie intake, figuring out your sweat rate, figuring out the best fueling strategy, nailing it down to where your last 3 to 4 or 5 big rides are 100% race day. From your meal the night before to your breakfast the morning of to what you do during the bike. It can't just be group ride fun where I'm going to go out and ride for 2 hours with my buddies, and we're going to stop and we're going to kind of kick our feet up and we're going to chill for 30 minutes. I'm going to have a couple snacks. I'm going to get back on the ride, and we're probably going to pace line for a little bit, and then we're going to stop again after 2 hours for a potty break, and then we're going to have a little bit more of relaxing, have a couple bars, have a couple chews, and then we'll come back and let's see, we'll call it 6 hours, but dude, we rode 100. And guess what,
thing,
dude?
man.
That's not gonna be how race day works. And listen, I'm all for getting out with other people, and I'm off, but it is a totally different thing. And so many athletes struggle so hard. And I think there is one thing that you should always do before a race, and it's do one of your last long rides unsupported by yourself. because most people do them all with a group or all with a buddy with unlimited stops, and then they get to race day, and guess what? You get none of that. And yes, there are other people out there, but they couldn't care less about you.
Yeah.
And it is that I 100% totally believe that the 112-mile bike during an Ironman is the most difficult part of the day. Because the demands that have been placed on you to stay present, to stay focused, to stay dialed in are tremendous. And it's daunting. And very few practice that in training. Because it's not just physically what's going to be demanded of you. Like, that's why you see athletes who like, oh, how do you do so on these long, how do you do so in the race when all you've done is ride the trainer? They're riding their bike by themselves in a closed room with no one to talk to, and they pedaled constantly for 5.5 hours. Why do you think they did so well on race day? Because it's basically the exact same, if not infinitely harder. Because you have no coasting, you have no outside motivation, it's just you. And most athletes do the exact opposite. They go out with their buddies and they go for a long ride, and it's like, so I would really encourage you, if you're training for your first 70.3, because that's even hard, or a longer race like an Ironman, like do some of those long rides, like do them by yourself, and do your intervals and focus and practice your nutrition and have your alarm set, and like even pretend like, I know in the past I've like set my timer, or not my timer, my lap mileage to what I know the race course is going to be. So like if your first water stop is going to be at like mile 8 and mile 20 and mile 35, then I'll set on my timer 8, 25, whatever, 40, whatever it's supposed to be. And my bike computer will go off, and that's when I know I should already be done with what I have on board, ready to take on more nutrition. And even practicing like very, very like small things like that, like those little details pay off, and your body remember those things. But guess what? They can't remember it if you don't practice it.
Right. That's funny you're saying that. When I was out riding hills at the Trace, I was doing a lot of repeats, and it kind of got in my head. I was like, well, this is good because I'm working on my strength, and I'm working on, extended climbs and just kind of staying, strong and consistent throughout the whole climb and everything. But then I would turn around and just coast back down. And I would do that a bunch of times. And it crossed my mind that maybe the next time I go out there, I will find a section where it's almost like a skateboard pipe, where I will go up a climb and then just get right onto the road and ride rollers for about 4 or 5 miles, and then hit another big climb, come back up that, and just it's the old deal where you get to the top of the hill and instead of turning around and coasting for like the next whatever, and like that's not how you race necessarily. So I'm trying to think of ways to get up, climb over the hill, and keep going and work on that little aspect of racing. Because at Wisconsin, for sure, there are a lot of times when you get to the top and then you go over and then you're going back down. But there's certainly many, many sections where you're going to get to a top of a hill, and then you kind of got to climb maybe a little bit of another hill, and then you turn into a roller stretch. And it's little things like that I think these 100-mile rides that we do with our buddies, and we stop and get rested. That's why it's so interesting to me is that you could do 5 of those throughout the summer. I've done 5 century rides or whatever, but you've never ridden 112 like you're going to ride it that day. And by mile 60 or 70, you're going to be like, man, this is a lot harder because the intensity, you got people all around you. You're going to be like trying to catch people, which is a mistake, but it's just natural tendencies. It's that race energy that I always talk about that is like worth 20% if you play it right. 15, 10, 20, whatever. It's worth more to you than, if you're out riding alone with nobody around and there's no aid stations and cheering fans and all that stuff. It's harder, and that's another reason why in this time of summer when you're out running alone or whatever the case is, there's no energy around you. That's why. That's just like real. you go to a race, and the next thing you know, you're running 30 seconds faster per mile for a 10K than you have been training, and you're like, how the hell did that happen? I think that's a lot to do with just pace setters and people around you, and you're just like, I can do that, and you're just, next thing you know, the race is over. But yeah, it's that in-race experience and the things and demands of that race that, how do you practice those and work on them? The little things that you're gonna run into, and it's gonna be the difference. It's like taking corners, It's like work on it, because you can come out of corners faster than, instead of just turning around this thing. If you use them right and you're prepared for it, especially at this course like Wisconsin. I really think I make up a lot of time on corners, honestly.
Oh, for sure. And so one of the biggest things that I took from reading one of those, or that I found just so interesting, was reading one of those, one of Cody Beal's recaps last year. I think it was like the anatomy of an Ironman win, and he specifically said, I mean, and most of his rides are on the trainer. Almost all of them are. Even his 4 or 5 hour race specific rides are on the trainer. But the way he would construct his workouts were based on the specific course and the duration of where he thought he would be within the race. And he would include intervals that would simulate the surges or the demands or the power demands of the elevation of that specific course. And those small amounts of detail are what us amateurs, most amateurs, you just don't think about. You think everything is the same. You think training for an Ironman Florida course is the exact same as training for a Lake Placid, and the demands of the course are just so incredibly different, from how you do your long rides to how many long rides you need to do. Do you need to do more, back-to-back long rides? Do you need to have big gear work? Do you need to have threshold work? Does it need to be at the beginning of your ride? Doesn't be late in the ride. Those little things, as much time as athletes spend just oodling and eyeing at the course and the race website ad nauseum, most athletes put absolutely zero of that to good use, besides just wasting their time. If you would take the amount of time you clicked on Ironman Wisconsin looking for the bib list, if you would take that amount of time and you would allocate it towards detailing and fine-tuning the demands of what the race is going to have you, then you're going to be better set up for success, because your bib list is going to come out on a specific day no matter what. You got no control over it. So take go look at your elevation chart. So if you're doing a race, this, we've done Ironman Wisconsin, we've trained a lot of athletes that have done it. We'll have a lot of athletes there that are going to do really well this year. What the course is. You know what the course is going to ask of you, and it's going to ask a lot. Even the swim preparation for a course like Wisconsin is going to be totally different than the swim preparation for a course like Chattanooga, where you're going to have a wetsuit swim maybe, but no matter what, it's going to be a downstream swim. So the demands are going to be a little bit different than doing a race like Wisconsin. And the training that's required for that, you can't be lazy in your swimming. You can't just do pull. You have to do so many different things to be prepared so you can take it to the bike. Because if there's one course, and then Lake Placid is like this, because Lake Placid is an open water swim, a hilly bike, and then a run, you want to talk about all your inadequacies and failures and lack of attention and detail showing up on the run, take those. Take open water swims with no downstream current in a hard bike course. You want to talk about all the decisions that lead you just to T2. And you may get away with them, but dear God, will they show themselves in an ugly form on the run on those types of courses. And it won't happen at mile 15, it'll happen at mile 5. But like I was saying, take a race like Wisconsin, you look at the first demands of the first 20 miles and the demands of the last 20 miles, and you look at what happens in the middle. And okay, well maybe I need to do some rides where my first hour and a half, 2 hours are kind of chill. And then I really need to know that I need to do big gear work, and I need to hammer it home and really get my legs prepared to withstand a brutal pounding in the middle. And then while I might look at that race course, which is like a gigantic mistake, I might look at that course and say, you know what? Oh, dude, like from mile like 80, dude, like it's like a net downhill.
Mm-hmm.
It's like famous last words. It's just like people do it at Louisville too. They're like, just like dude, it's like a net downhill. Like I've got it. Like I just gotta make it to mile 80. But what you don't know is that for the most part, a lot of the time, guess what you get? You get like a massive headwind.
Yep.
And that massive headwind is going to be pounding you after you just got smashed on the bike by all those relentless hills. And they're not just relentless hills. They're relentless hills. I know I'm like striking fear into everyone who's signed up for Wisconsin. But there's
the hills are the easy part.
But the hills are the easy part. But it's not just the hills. It's like the fact that you have to slow down to like restart your movement. So you have to worry about that too. Like you have to train your body. You know, we always go back to like the phrase like different horses for different courses. And while I think that's generally true, some people are made for certain courses. You can also train yourself to be a better horse for a better course. Don't just settle. Pay attention. Put the details to work. Fine tune it. If you know you've got, and this has like even been more evident to me now that I'm here and living in Chattanooga and I've been able to run like a lot of the run course. It's like, man, like if you don't live here, you know, I'm going to run, you know, where I'm training and I'm doing Ironman Chattanooga, I'm going to run like, you know, I'm going to practice running really, really slow for the first 2 miles to simulate like the first uphill. And then I'll kind of have some, you know, light rollers the first, like, you know, 5 to 6 miles. And then I need to find a place where I can run a really long hill and some downhills and do it again. Because just like mentally wrapping your mind around what your body is going to need to do, even outside of the execution and the demands to do it well and do it over and over again to where you can replicate it on race day without even having to think twice, like the amount of confidence that gives you is enormous. Because I'll tell you this, and this is like totally contrast to like what Starkey would tell you because he got on our podcast, is that he basically memorizes every inch of the course. Instead of spending like 3 hours the day before of your race driving the course, spend the first 3 months before race day mimicking your training to prepare you for the details of the course you're about to take on. Because honestly, then outside of like some hard, you know, hairpin turns or some descents, like, listen, your body by then knows what it's going to do, and it's going to have no problem doing it. So just like take those, like, I just think it's one of the most under talked about aspects in training for big races that are long and that are demanding is training your body to, you know, like if it starts early and it's flat, train flat and then head for the hills. Or if it's hills first and then flat, head for the hills first. Because both of those terrains ask different things of your body. You know, like, so if it's going to ask you to hammer it late, guess what? You got to have legs late. In your body, you can train your body for that, but what you can also do is ride easy and then absolutely smash it the last 2 hours. Not only going to get a great fitness benefit from it, not only is your body going to remember it, but guess what? You're going to finish your ride thinking, dude, I nailed it. And I know that I've got what it takes to end this ride strong, versus just noodling around for another 5 hour zone 2 ride that ends the same and starts the same as it always has. You know, there's just put the details to work and think about it that way to set yourself up for success, because those are the details that matter.
Mm-hmm. A couple thoughts. I was watching one of those Kona. Yeah, that was good, man. No, I think that's some good stuff. I was watching one of those Kona replays or something, and I think it was Cameron Worth or somebody I was talking about. For the pros there, like what you're just saying, he felt that, you know, that race starts at mile 80 of the bike. Mm-hmm. You know, that's where he has to be able to bring it home strong, you know, because you got to get out. I mean, those dudes are running, man. You know, that's a little bit different because they're pros and stuff. But still, I mean, it's all relative to what we think about. And to be able to, so I've been thinking about that at Wisconsin, because that's almost like that's when you get off the hills, basically, up there. And then how are you going to finish? Because that, for me, has been notoriously the worst part that you think you're done. You know, you get off that last hill and you come through Verona and whatever, and then you got 20 some miles left or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I got it. And then you get onto that last 10-mile stretch of rollers with that wind in your face, and it's like that's what that's what really kind of puts the hammer down. But I was going to ask you regarding training and courses, because I have had really difficult luck at, or not luck, whatever it is, results.
Difficult luck? They would call that poor luck.
Poor luck at Louisville. And it is because of the run, and I'm sure it's got a lot to do with what we were talking about earlier with fueling and all these kinds of other things, but training for a flat race, like the flat run, like Louisville, maybe Florida, whatever, Maryland, I think. Do you suggest? I mean, like, let's say it's Florida too. Like, just train an aero. Do you try to go? I mean, I think like hills. That's the one thing I think I screwed up on, is that I ran a lot of flat stuff every time I've gone in Louisville. I've just been running out flat. And I wondered if I'd neglected hill work, just because I feel like where I get nailed on those flat ones is my hip flexors get weak. And like by the second loop, I'm just having trouble picking up my legs. And even though it's a flat course, I've run slower there. So I'm just curious about because I like, the hill work to me, even if it's just little hills on the run, it just sort of changes up those muscles or gives my body sort of a relief or change of pattern, and I feel like that run on that flat is just harder for me.
I think it's harder for a lot of people, and it's easier than it is but it's easier for some people than it is others. And while I think you should always race specific, like hills are always your friends. And so I think you always have to add in hills and take the hilly route a lot. But you also, I think, so I'd recommend like every other week, like attack the hills, like on your normal stuff, and then speed work, maybe keep it flat. And then every other week, make sure you do a long, slow run on pancake flat terrain. Don't just always do hills. Don't always just do flats. Mix it up. Like, be a Swiss Army knife. Be prepared for anything. Be the multi-tool triathlete. Like, that's what you need to be. You need to be prepared. And like, that's the other thing that was like, flats don't prepare you for hills. Because if you're doing hills, like, and some of them, like some of those like downhills at some of these courses are like quad busting painful. You got to be prepared for those. And so again, like you have to, those, like, that's something I wouldn't even worry about until like more like the race specific phase, in terms of like, I've trained myself to be the best athlete that I can possibly be. And then once I'm like entering my last like peak block or my last phase, now I need to become the best athlete, the best version athlete that I have now on that course. And that's the kind of detail I would add in, so like for you, that would come here in like the next like 2 or 3 weeks. Like you would be, right now you're training Mike to be the best and the fittest version of himself he's ever been. In these last like 4 to 5 weeks, it needs to move from, I need to take Mike, who's the fittest, in the best shape of his life, and now he needs to focus on translating that specifically to what Wisconsin is going to ask of him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Instead of just from day one or from 1 week out, it's about gaining fitness, and the same thing could be said for athletes who, I get it. I get you want to be heat trained, and I get it that it's important to you, and I see there is a huge benefit to being heat acclimated. But you want to know who does the best in the heat? The person that's the fittest. And so don't sacrifice, don't be the guy 3 months out doing intervals on his trainer with the heat lamp on, with no wind or with no fan, dying on his trainer, because you're not getting fitter. You're just allowing your current fitness to adapt to heat. Like, again, it's about being the best athlete you can, and then as you get closer to the race day, then get acclimated to the heat. But don't ever, 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 for long, long periods of time, don't ever sacrifice fitness for acclimation. Okay, so you have to be specific about that as well, because a lot of people are now, I'm like, you're just like, I get it, you want to be heat trained, but don't be an idiot. Like, there's a difference in getting fitter and getting acclimated than there is just applying your current ability to be able to suffer longer in hot conditions. Because again, if you take a guy who runs a 7:30-minute mile and a guy that runs a 9-minute mile, and you place them on the same race, who's going to be faster in 95-degree temps? The guy who runs a 7:30, because he's fitter. So again, like, don't give up the hard intervals, and like right now, take him to the treadmill. So you're still getting that, but you're not trashing yourself. Keep your easy runs outside. So it's just, there are so many different things that athletes can do to just pay more attention to the when, the why, and the how of their training, and how it could be applied to using and gaining their best fitness for race day, and then putting it towards the best race they can on the specific course. Like windier courses are great for a guy like you who has access to the lab. You can be out there, but it doesn't mean you have to be out there every day. Like you go between the lab and the Natchez Trace, you got one that's pancake flat and it's 1.2 miles around and super windy and the flattest place you've ever ridden. And then the other place you go is 444 miles long with a rolling hard terrain that's super hard. And so you have to be well rounded. But again, that's why you need to be specific. And those are some of the details that I would just really encourage everyone to start to pay more attention to and understand. If you're a person who isn't very comfortable climbing, get comfortable climbing. Know what that's going to demand of your legs, and then know how to attack the course. If you're a person who is not very comfortable in aero and you're doing Ironman Florida, Maryland, or Arizona, guess what? Time to get comfortable in aero. So there's little things you just can't be lazy about. That could have that. Listen, like it's 80% fitness. Okay, race day is. The 20% that can ruin it are nutrition, details, and then failing to prepare, and then bad execution. All those can totally overshadow the best fitness you've ever had in your life. Those small little things. So take the same concentration, take the same dedication, be just as motivated to figure out the small things that are going to allow. It's like, let's talk about fitness in terms of cake and icing. Well, race preparation is 80% cake, and then execution is like the icing. In order to be able to execute, you got to pay attention to the icing. So I think that, kind of in closing, look at your preparation, look at your current fitness, look at the course you're training for, the only course you're training for. Those are the first conversations you and I ever had. You're preparing for Muncie. This is like 6 years ago. You're preparing for Muncie. You're like, all right, am I going to prepare for Muncie? Yes. But what did I tell you? You're not going to remember this. It's too late. But let's go me. You're not. So
I will when you tell me.
Yeah, you will. You can tell me. So Muncie's this weekend. If you're
it's
doing,
hot. No shade.
It's hot and it's pancake flat. So I said we're training you for Muncie technically, but we're preparing you for Wisconsin in the back of our mind. Everything that we did, everything that we were doing was for Wisconsin. All the big gear work was for Wisconsin. All the double rides were for Wisconsin. All of that was for Wisconsin. And so I just think that, again, like, you have to take that big picture view on the kind of athlete that I need to be on race day for this course. Because, I mean, even like to fine tune it, and I don't like to talk about weight and stuff, but 10 pounds, being 10 pounds heavier at Ironman Florida, no big deal on the bike, like zero. Now, being a little 10 pounds heavier at Wisconsin, bigger deal, because you're carrying up so many hills, and so it's just those things, like just know who you are, know what you're training and what you're training it for, and be specific about it. And that's been your lesson for today. Be specific about it.
Be specific.
Yeah, be the multi-tool triathlete. Be specific about it.
All right, man.
Sorry, I did too much talking today. I'll just try and shut up on Thursday.
Well, yeah.
I'll let you take it from there. Thanks for listening, as usual. Hope you've taken some little nuggets of knowledge from a more triathlon-centered podcast after our last two that were a little more focused on the life, more like a life cast, the mental and emotional aspects of triathlon and how we can kind of incorporate those into our lives. If you missed those and you haven't, this is your first episode, please go back and listen. We'll have 280 now, 3 in the archives. Dig back, dig deep, listen. We have a lot of good info back there, and we appreciate you listening. Again, we come to you twice a week. If you want to be part of the conversation that surrounds the podcast, you can join us on Facebook. You can search Crushing Iron Group, answer one simple question, don't be a robot, and we will let you in. You can follow us on Instagram, C26_triathlon. Also, we're on Facebook, Crushing Iron. And then, again, as we said at the onset of the episode, or of this episode, for everything and all of your C26 Triathlon and Crushing Iron needs, you can go to crushingiron.com. More info on our gear, camps, coaching and training packages, our club. All things are there. Check that out. And if you have any questions, as always, hit up Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions for me, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. That sounds great. I will see you in a little bit.
That's right, dude. I'll see you later.
All right, man. Have a good one.